Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Let's Dev. Today we are starting a brand new project. Now, I know what you're thinking, and yes, I do in fact have too many ideas. The truth is, actually, while I'm enjoying working on our current set of projects, I wanted to also work on something that hadn't been inspired by some existing product. Which leads us to today's project. Today we begin work on what will be a car demolition game with a twist. What's that twist? Well, for now I'm keeping that close to the chest and will reveal it in due time. But for now, we'll be focusing on creating the demolition aspect first. So today's plan is to get the base mechanics for what will be our driving mechanics down, and also create a base car model for our game. Yes, I said model, because not only are we bringing back the good old magic of Voxo to construct our pseudo 3D presented game, but I'll also be taking the bits of knowledge that I've gained from the previous work and applying it here to try something new that'll hopefully work in the end. Hopefully. So let's not waste any more time and shift into the next gear and more car puns here. First thing we needed to do was start working on the actual driving mechanics. The ideal situation here is to build something with universal mechanics that would allow for the same code to be used on AI opponents or even support the idea of local multiplayer. Now, the driving mechanics for this game are the cars are always moving, they're always in motion. There's no way to stop other than slamming into something, and even then, it's only momentary and the speed will immediately pick back up. So with this in mind, we only have to focus on two aspects of control: speed and direction, both of which can be conveniently defined using GameMaker's motion set function. Now, the original idea here was to dictate car direction based on a four-way control scheme, with the car rotating in context to the direction being pressed. So pressing left would drift the car left, and right would drift right. The issue was getting up and down to work properly in context. Now, normally up and down would dictate speed in a game about cars, but because our cars never stop moving, there's no need for such functionality. The quick version of the issue is simply because our camera angle is fixed, direction dictates behavior. If the player presses up or down at certain angles, the expected rotation changes depending on the current direction. Initially, my idea was to set up braking points based on 90-degree angles, mostly for testing purposes. If the angle fell between certain braking points, it would determine the rotation direction. This proved to be a bit more complicated than expected, as the car would freak out when navigating between angles too close to the braking points, which resulted in bouncing behavior. And believe me, I spent a lot of time trying to find a way to fix it, but eventually decided to take a break and somewhat reconsider the need for up and down controls at all. So for the time being, I moved on to something else. I decided to start working on the collision for the game. It's important that when making contact with a solid object, whether that be a wall or another car, there should be an impact to the hit. And so I wanted a knockback function in the game. The method in which I'd go about this went through many variations, some using static variables, others trying to dictate behavior based on math, which, by the way, all with equally hilarious results, some of which I'll have to remember for future games. In short, this was proving to be quite a challenge. I had the idea, I had the general knowledge, but pulling it off was a little more difficult than I expected. The code I eventually settled on for now was checking for the collisions, and then using that collision event as the source of the knockback, having the player simply bounce in the opposite direction in relation to that collided object. Now, it's pretty noticeable that a glaring issue when trying to get the collision working properly was it only applied to the middle section of the car. Well, up until this point, the player car was comprised of three parts: the front, the body, and the tail. It was done this way to hopefully make handling both damage variables and visual content easier in the future, but it also proved to be problematic, so I changed the sprite to accommodate the entire car. This did indeed help, and we were in fact getting closer to something resembling a proper knockback effect. Now, with the car coming to a momentary stop after hitting walls, there came the issue of being able to turn like a top despite being at a complete standstill. So I fixed that by making the turn speed a dynamic value that would increase to a max number over time. This was achieved by putting the entire turning system on a constant timer. Doing this made the code less universal for later on, but for now we just need to make the game function properly. Now, it's not perfect, but for now it works. And since recording this, I've already identified a ton of fixes that can be made to the existing code. However, it was time to take a break and work on the car model. Now, full disclosure, I can't draw cars. If there's one thing I can guarantee I'll screw up drawing, it's cars. This not so impressive doodle of a car took me a long time to get looking even remotely like a car, so the idea of having to take this and create a 3D version was pretty damn scary. Importing the sprite to Magical Voxel, I got to work. Expanding the model to about 16 pixels, assuming that'd be the general final width of the full car model. And like a lot of the models I create in Magical Voxel, a lot of it is improvisation based on what looks good at the time, and then redoing it when I realize I've just ruined it and completely screwed up. Also, because the structure of a car is often symmetrical, there was little reason to work on more than half a model at a time. Now, a lot of time was spent on trying to imagine what would be lost in translation when importing this model to GameMaker, because the assumption is we'd be disabling interpolation, so it was important to keep in mind that we'd be dealing with flat colors for the most part. By the way, these aren't the final colors. Just vivid colors I use to help keep track of different aspects of the model. After a lot of trial and error, second guessing, and plain redos, I eventually came up with a nice first draft of a car model. It wasn't perfect, but continuing to chip away at it got me close to something at least usable. I actually became obsessed with the odd perception that the car was too box-like, and spent a lot of time trying to round it out. And off video, while tinkering with the model, I realized that this was mostly due to the fact that the car was just too thin in its width. Constricting it to 16 pixels was a mistake, and expanding the width just a little bit made the car actually look less like a box and more like an actual car. And so this brings us to the end of our first foray into a new project, one that yet again challenges me in new and interesting ways. Now, as I said, there's already a lot I'm aware of and ready to fix, so the next stab at this project should be pretty fun. I'm not sure if the model is exactly ready for importing just yet, but we'll see. There's still a lot to do that doesn't even involve visuals, though visuals will play a part in the project eventually. But that all comes in due time. For now, hey, if you enjoyed this series and what you saw here today, please leave a like. If you aren't already subscribed to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button. And as always, let me know what you think about the project so far, or anything else on your mind. Be sure to leave them all in the comment section below. I always love to hear from you guys. And with that said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.